Welcome into this week's edition of the ETSN podcast. I'm Clint Buckley, and I'm joined as always by Chandler Vessels. The best time of the year begins 1 week from today, and it lasts all the way until Christmas. And that's the Texas High School Football Playoffs. Are you ready, Chandler?
Yeah, I'm excited to get my first taste of Texas high school football. It's been a great regular season, but I know especially as we get into those later rounds, there's going to be even better games than I've seen so far, so I'm really excited to watch the games and report on them too.
Well, before we get there, we need to preview the final week of the regular season. It's hard to believe that your first football season in Texas is almost over. We got one more week left, and it's all about playoff scenarios. We got a bunch of them running around East Texas, and we'll run through some of the most intriguing in our area. And we'll start with District 11 6A. We'll know a lot tonight about John Tyler's chances because Rockwall and North Mesquite played this evening. John Tyler needs North Mesquite to beat Rockwall to even have a chance. And then if North Mesquite wins tonight against Rockwall, then John Tyler needs to beat crosstown rival Tyler Lee tomorrow night in order to secure the last playoff spot from the district. And Tyler Lee's playing well right now. You know, their record doesn't indicate that they're one of the best teams in the district, but they've played really well in district games this year. Really, the only games they were really out of were Mesquite Horn and Longview, and those were the two best teams in the district. So you can kind of give them a pass. But last week, Lee had probably their best performance of the year. They hung 50 on North Mesquite. They ran for 438 yards. They've got a really good 1-2 combo that you've seen in person, Chance Amy and Ladarius Wickware, that can run the football. And that's going to be a key for John Tyler. They're going to have to be able to figure out a way to stop Lee's running game in order to come out with a win because John Tyler's offense has really not played well down the stretch. I mean, I know they've had some injuries and they've had kind of a revolving door at running back this year and really a revolving door at quarterback. They've used two different quarterbacks this season. So it's been kind of an up-and-down year on offense for them. So, their defense is really going to have to come to play. And the good thing about that is their run defense is probably the strength of that team. And it'll be interesting to see how they go into this game, especially if they have a chance to clinch a playoff spot. Mm-hmm. You know, if North Mesquite is able to win tonight, then tomorrow's game becomes obviously a much bigger deal. So, looking forward to that. I'll be there in Tyler. It's really cool what they do. Every year when Lee and John Tyler play, they induct a new class into the Tyler ISD Athletic Hall of Fame. Mm-hmm. Always some big names go in, and there's some big names again going in this year. So looking forward to that, and hopefully the game will have some playoff implications on the line. If not, it'll still be a great game, and I'm looking forward to it. Down in District 12 6A, Lufkin has already assured itself a home playoff game. In fact, they will play either John Tyler or Rockwall Heath, whichever team makes Division II number 2 seed. They will play them at home next Friday night at 7:30. We also know that Longview has already clinched a home field playoff game in the first round out of 11 6A, and they will host Beaumont Westbrook, a rematch of last year's first round game, which of course took place in Beaumont. And I'm sure Longview is eager to get some revenge from last year after losing in the first round, which doesn't happen very often under John King. So that's going to be interesting to watch next week. In 5A, District 16 5A is just about set. Marshall, Texas High, and Pine Tree have already qualified for the playoffs. Pine Tree is in for the first time since 2001. So congratulations to Kerry Lane and that group over there for getting into the playoffs. The last spot will come down to Greenville and Sulphur Springs. If there's a tie involved, Sulphur Springs has the edge because they beat them last week 21-7. So Sulphur Springs is in the driver's seat this week. They have a game against Hallsville, and obviously if they win that, they're in the playoffs. So 17-5A, this could get a little kooky. Ennis and Corsicana are already in. They're both undefeated, and they play each other this week for the district title. But the final two spots are going to come down to three teams, White House, Lindell, and Jacksonville. Chandler, you've been kind of looking at this all week and trying to break down all the different scenarios. Two big games to look at this week, Lindell against White House, Nacogdoches against Jacksonville. Yeah,
and we were talking about this just earlier before we started the podcast. I believe that White House will be in the playoffs whether or not they lose because they have already beaten Jacksonville by 17 points earlier this season. So even if there ends up being a three-way tie, they've already got a 17-point advantage on those teams. And I doubt if Lindell does win, I doubt they're going to beat them by that much. But even if they did, I think you were saying that there's like a cap that they set it at.
Right.
So they can't. I think White House is in no matter what. Jacksonville is in if they win. because they'll have the head-to-head against Lindale. But if Lindale wins, that's where things get more interesting.
Yeah.
Because then you got Jacksonville, who beat Lindale by 10 points, and then depending on how many points Lindale beats White House by, if that happens, that will end up determining the last team to make it from District 17 5A. And talking about that Lindale-White House game, so the Wildcats, White House doesn't really score a lot. It hasn't scored a lot this season. They've won on defense whenever they are able to get those victories. So if White House is going to want to come away with this game and potentially push Lindale out of that playoff race, they're going to have to, pick it up a little bit on offense. I've seen them once this season, and I was really impressed with Cameron Cantrell, what he did in that game that I saw. He had about 200 yards receiving and 4 touchdowns, but it seems like in the other games this season he's been kind of quiet. I'm going to look for him to sort of come alive in this game, maybe put up another 100-yard game and get White House a few touchdowns to put him ahead. As far as Lindale goes, they have Jordan Robinson at running back, who's very capable of running the ball. He's got 750 yards this season, 9 touchdowns. They've also got a great quarterback-wide receiver combo of Dylan Heineman and Colton Brown, combined for over 500 yards this season. So it'll be exciting to see what happens in that game.
Yeah, and Nacogdoches and Jacksonville. Jacksonville's coming off a big win last week against Lindale, which kind of put them in this driver's seat. Nacogdoches has struggled this year. They haven't won a district game. But this game is a rematch of last year's game, which ended up deciding the last playoff spot. I remember it took place in Nacogdoches. Jacksonville was able to gut out a big win to get into the playoffs. So Nacogdoches remembers that. They can't make the playoffs, but I'm sure they would love to play spoiler and keep Jacksonville out of the playoffs potentially. So those two games are going to be key to look at in 17-5A. Now on to 4A, 9-4A Division I, the quote-unquote District of Doom. What we know so far is that Carthage and Henderson are in the playoffs, and Chapel Hill is out. And that means that the 2 remaining spots are left to 4 teams: Kilgore, Center, Palestine, and Bullard. And it's going to be crazy. Right now, the most simple scenario is if Kilgore if Kilgore beats Bullard and Henderson beats Palestine, which are the favorites in those 2 games, then Kilgore, Henderson, and Center make the playoffs. Center is off this week. But if there ends up being a 5-way tie, it could get nuts. If we're talking about if Palestine beats Henderson and Bullard beats Kilgore, we're looking at 5 teams all at 3-3. And only 2 of those, or only 2 of those teams can make the playoffs. We already mentioned Henderson is in. It's going to come down to points. The cap is 15. Right now, Kilgore is in the most precarious situation. They really need a win in order to avoid missing the playoffs. And this is a proud program that's only missed it once since 1995. So. I do expect Kilgore to take care of business after last week's game. They're up 28-0 against Center, and Center comes all the way back and beats them. And that's kind of been sticking with them all week long. They're playing at home at senior night. I expect Kilgore to come out with a win. Palestine and Henderson. This game is a little more up in the air. I think Palestine's offense is something to keep an eye on. They've been quietly having a really good year on offense, and it goes to their quarterback, Tyler Gray, who was our Offensive Player of the Week last week, and their running back, sophomore running back Jeremiah Davis, has had a great season. But Henderson is coming off probably their best offensive performance of the season last week against Bullard. Trey Hall, we've been waiting on him to kind of break out all season long, and he did that last week. He had 344 passing yards, threw for 4 touchdowns, really his best game of the season. And Caleb Bedford, their sophomore receiver, I think we're going to be hearing a lot from in the future. Big game, 7 catches, 200 yards, 3 touchdowns. So Palestine are going to have their hands full on defense to kind of slow down that Henderson passing game, which seems to have rounded into form from last week. District 7, 4A Division II, Pleasant Grove, Gilmer, Pittsburgh are in. Atlanta controls its own destiny. It needs a win or a Gladewater loss to secure that last playoff spot, while Gladewater needs a win and an Atlanta loss to make it. That is because Atlanta holds the head-to-head tiebreaker against Gladewater. from beating them earlier in the year. On to 3A, 9-3A Division II. Surprisingly enough, we thought this was going to be one of the best districts of the season coming into the year, and it hadn't disappointed, but all the playoff spots are accounted for. West Rusk, Elysian Fields, Wascom, and ARP are in the playoffs. Those are kind of the four we expected to make it at the beginning of the year. The only thing left to decide is seeding. We know ARP is locked into the 4th seed. They're going to play Newton in the first round next week, which is a rematch of last year's regional championship game. So a lot of intrigue in that one for sure. West Rusk Elysian Fields kind of threw the district for a loop last week by handing West Rusk its first loss of the season. That has created a tie right now at the top with West Rusk, Elysian Fields, and Wascom, all with just one loss. So it's going to be interesting to see how the seeding shapes up at the end of play on Friday night. So a lot of things to look forward to this week. We can't wait for it all to settle out, and we'll have the playoffs ready to begin. Before we get out of here, we want to do a quick shout-out to our offensive and defensive players of the week. On offense, it's center quarterback Jaden Hicks. He passed for 324 yards and 5 touchdowns, and leading the Rough Riders to an amazing 49-35 comeback win over Kilgore. As we mentioned earlier, center was down 28-0 at one point, and really saved their season. They have a really good chance to make the playoffs. They're off this week, so they're kind of waiting for some of the dominoes to fall. But Jaden Hicks, big-time performance. He's our offensive player of the week. Congrats. And on defense?
We have New Boston's Cade Font. He's 17 tackles, 5 for loss, 1 sack, and 1 forced fumble in New Boston's 44-32 win over Sabine, their first win of the season. So he came up big for them and got them that win, so they didn't finish out the season without one. So congrats to him.
Yeah, congratulations to our players of the week. That's going to do it. Be on the lookout this weekend for the latest playoff pairings. We'll be updating them as we get them this weekend. Follow us on Twitter at Clint Buckley, at Chandler Vessels for all the news concerning the playoffs and everything going on in East Texas, really. For Chandler Vessels, I'm Clint Buckley. We'll be back next week, and we'll take a look at the first round of the playoffs. Exciting stuff.